Alright, so let's continue with our sound design for our chords. So we already created the lush chords, and let's deactivate this one. This is our new lush chord version, and we will continue with those center plugs. If you take a listen at the lush chords, you can see they're pretty wide. They have a lot of attack, transients, and ambient noise. And those center plugs, as you can hear, are pretty centered. This is why I called them center plugs. So they are very short. They are plugs, and they aren't like completely mono, but they're pretty centered. And this is because those lush chords are the main chords that pretty much cover everything. So they have a little bit of attack and transient in the center. They have some noise that goes out to the sides, some ambient stuff. And we want to now enhance the sound by adding, in this case, the center plug. So let's take a listen together. So you can hear they are adding a lot of top end and a lot of transients and attack to the chords in the center. And I actually have an imager loaded up in this chain. So still all of our plugins are currently deactivated. So we will do that in a further lecture. But for now, I only have this imager. And if we take a look at Ozone 8 imager, at the Ozone 8 imager, you can see what I did here. So if you don't know Ozone and don't know how the imager works, by the way, you can download the imager for free. It's part of the Ozone 8 mastering suite, but you can download the Ozone imager as a standalone plugin for free, where you can actually change the imaging, so to speak, the center and the sides based on bands. And it was originally included in the suite, but I think it's free for like a couple of months or now, so since the release of Ozone 8, I think. And it's pretty powerful. I don't know a lot of other plugins out there that do something similar to this and in this good way. So what you can do is you have 4 bands. You can set those bands to your tasting. So I could drag and drop this one and can solo this one, can deactivate this processing of this band. And you have a center line, which is not affecting the band at all. And you can pull this up to -100 and +100. And you can see it's calling it stereo width. And you have 2 circles right here, 1 circle right here. It's pretty intuitive, mono stereo. So when you pull all the way down to -100, you have a complete summed mono signal. And you have a polar sample right here, where you can see actually, let me solo this, how it works. And if you take a look at only the low bands, we have complete mono, left, right, the amplitude is right here. So we have the phase, the phase is right here. And we have left and right panning. If you take a look at the kind of low mid range, they're quite close together. They're not completely mono, but they are almost. Then we have the high mids, or the highs, goes up to 10K. They are pretty spread out, but still the chords would be more wider if I would deactivate this one. You can see they're spreading all the way around. And when I add this band, they're getting like a little bit pushed together, so they're not that wide. And I didn't do a lot with those super highs because they aren't that necessary for our attack that we want to add with those plugs. But I still pull them down a little bit. So this plugin I use for making it more centered, because I can then use multiple voices, detune them, and have a wide patch that I then pull to the center. So for this creation, let's now bypass and deactivate the imager. But before we do that, let's duplicate the center plugs. And again, this is the centered version, and now we will deactivate this one and you can see and hear how wide they are now. So let's solo the new one, pull down the reverb so we don't have any processing after the patch, and of course we don't want the imager. So this is the pure sound that comes out of Serum. And now let's initialize the preset. Before we do anything with the actual sound, let's just increase the unison and detune again to like around 0.05. So typical chord source, kind of superstar sound. Next up, we want to add the square that you could see before we actually initialize this patch, and we'll use the basic square that we have in the basic shapes. And now we want to push that down an octave because it's way too dominant. And this is a cool trick that I like to use very often, especially for hardstyle and EDM leads in general. When you have a saw sound and you going for a saw sound, you may want to include a square that is pitched down one or two octaves with a quite lower volume. So this is what we're going to do now in a second, lowering the volume. But this way you can actually increase the power of the saw wave without changing the character of it. So when I pull this down a little bit, I think it still sounds like a saw. But it has a big difference if you deactivate the oscillator beat with the square, or if you use the square to give more, to make the sound fuller with the saw that you have as your lead sound. Okay, so now that we did this, of course we want to use some filters because those are sounds, not sounds, of course they are sounds, those are chords that aren't super saws, they are more plucky. So let's add the filter to that and route both oscillators through it. Of course, we want to use it more like a little steeper, so let's choose MG low 18 to get this pluck effect. We don't want to change the cutoff right now because first we want to shape the sounds itself and then add the pluck effect with the second envelope. So for this, let's just lower the sustain a little bit so we got this little attack right away before we use the envelope 2. I think it's cool. And let's increase the release a little bit. Something like around there. So next up, let's actually use the envelope 2 and map it to the cutoff. Of course, we want to make sure it's unipolar. If not, you can change this in the matrix right here. Or again, with holding Alt and Shift and clicking on this map button. Now, of course, as you learned, I hope you learned by now, we want to lower the sustain to make this pluck effect. And in this case, we just we leave the decay as it is because I think that works fine. And now it's actually time to pull down and lower the cutoff. So let's set the cutoff to around 100 Hertz. I think it's quite cool, but we want to kind of increase the pluckiness, so the top, and that goes through the filter. I think that's quite nice already. And the next thing that I have on my list over here is, of course, the effect section. So let's head over to there and activate the hyperdimension. By the way, this is a processing unit that I use pretty much on every chords that I create. I use it on a lot of leads as well. But most of the time I turn down the hyper because I only want to use the dimension, which I said before is like something like a simple delay. So in this case, I chose 35% of mix, and I think like 37% of dimension. So let's take a listen. You can hear a little difference. It's not that much, but it's just spreading out those chords, even though we are pushing them together in the next step. But that's just because I want to create a sound that could work on its own, and it's filling up the gap of the main chords. So we only pushing it to the center because we don't want that wideness that the main chords already have. So next up, let's of course use some chorus to make it a little bit chorusy. So we have not that much of presence in this chord sound because it's not the main sound. And I actually only choose like 11%. As you can hear, it's not much of a difference, but it's very important for that. And that's actually all we have to do. It's again a very simple patch. We only have one mapping, which is envelope to cutoff, to the filter cutoff, two effect units activated, and that's it. Because we want to now activate the imager again. And we are pretty much done. Not pretty much, we are done with this patch. So let's again increase the reverb a little bit right here and listen to that. With the main chords, of course. Okay, so now that we did this, let's... Do I have any other? Nah, okay. No, we don't want to do that. We want to do that. Ah, okay. I was wondering why it sounds so harsh, but this is just because we don't have any sidechaining turned on. So there you can see, actually, that's a pretty good example how much effect a post-processing has. Something like sidechain, the only thing that I actually did is sidechaining, cutting the lows in the chords and adding, of course, some reverb in the basses right there, and pushing the highs a little bit in the chords and the leads, and adding again some reverb in the chords. No, not here. In compressor, yes, and there we go. That's all still activated in there. Yeah, some reverb for the full bass to glue together a little bit. So you can see this has a big impact on the mix if we don't activate those few plugins. So let's take a listen again. It just sounds like bullshit, basically. It sounds like a horrible mix, but we didn't mix it at all, and you don't have to do a lot actually to mix it. So we will do that in the next lectures as well. But for now, we're done with our main second patch of the chords, and we will continue with those stereo plugs.